So let's start from the beginning with the definitions. What does it mean to commit? What does loyalty mean? What should it mean for a high quality of life? I often like to think of the difference between a commitment and a promise. Okay, a promise is saying, I will do something. A commitment is doing the thing. It has a presence to it. If I commit to being in this relationship, what I mean is right here, right now, I'm going to be in this relationship, whatever that means. Be present. My behavior will be the behavior of a person who's really in with this relationship. For example, if I'm going to play with my daughter, I don't do it distracted on my phone, kind of, yeah, this is fun. To commit would be to really play with her like this is the last time. Be the same in a loving relationship. If I'm going to really be with my wife, it means I'm going to pay attention to her, listen to her, make plans with her, do everything where I'm like someone who's going to be here long term. Booking a holiday in 3 months' time rather than saying maybe one day we'll go on a holiday. There's a big difference between a promise and a commitment. A commitment really feels like you're already in. A promise is saying, I will be in later. Feels almost the same. In fact, you get a big reward from promises. You often get positive approval reactions from promises, but they are not the same as a commitment, and quite often they are a pseudo commitment. Saying, I will marry you one day is not really a commitment. It's actually putting off a commitment. Saying, will you marry me right now is a commitment. And I'm not saying you have to do that, I'm just sort of pointing out the difference between the two. Now, a lot of people, they're quite fragile in their relationships. They can end it at any time because it's built on promises rather than commitments. They're saying, yes, we will be together long term rather than I'm going to behave like we're going to be together long term. It's a subtle difference, but you can see it when it's happening. Now, there's a slight difference, in my opinion, between commitment and loyalty. Loyalty is kind of saying, I will stick with you no matter what happens. Again, there's a kind of a promise element to that. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to maintain this. A lot of people, I think, are stuck on bad loyalty. They say, I'm going to stick with this thing no matter what happens. But when those conditions actually come through, they end up staying with something that's not healthy for them. For example, if I say, I'm going to stay at this job for the rest of my life, and then it gets bought out by a new company who treats all the staff like shit and changes everything, then am I really still loyal to the original agreement? Am I still loyal to the original company? Or has the company actually changed and I'm no longer beholden to this loyalty? I didn't commit to this company. It's the same with a marriage. If I say I commit to you, I'm not saying I'm committing to you if you become a different person, right? I'm committing to what I'm signing up to this now, here. If this significantly changes, then we've got to renegotiate this agreement. Some people think loyalty is no matter what you end up becoming, I'll stick with you. This idea that a person is always the same person for their whole life, and that's just not the case. You can be deceived into thinking there's something they're not, and it only gets revealed later. This is quite often the case in abusive relationships. They're not abusive at the start, they reveal themselves to be an abuser later on. You didn't commit to an abuser, you committed to the nice person. Or just people change over time. That's the thing. You cannot be loyal to someone under the impression that they will not change. Human beings always change, constantly change. I mean, right now, as I'm talking, particles are leaving my body, new particles are being formed and taken in. I'm literally changing physiologically as I speak. My beliefs change on a minute by minute basis, even though it's even so slightly. But if you look at me now versus 10 years ago, it's two different people almost. And this is nearly everybody. Very few people maintain a really consistent personality and belief system forever. So when you're making a commitment, when you're saying loyal, there needs to be some conditions about what that would be broken by. If I say I'll be loyal to you unless you murder my whole family, that's kind of fair enough. But if I say no matter what kind of demon you turn out to be, I'm going to stick with you, well, that's not really values based. That's just blind loyalty. But what is a commitment? I had a friend who had been married for like 15 years or something before I was even in a long-term relationship. And they had 3 kids, and I was just like, dude, how the fuck do you do it? Because back that time in my life, I just couldn't comprehend marriage. Couldn't comprehend staying with someone forever. I was like, how the fuck do you do it, dude? And I'd always been on the assumption that people who can last a long time together are either deluding themselves or they just feel the love all the time, and so there's no reason to leave. And he woke me up to a new concept, which is he started talking about how sometimes they don't actually love each other, that it comes and goes in like these peaks and valleys, and that sometimes they can't stand each other, and sometimes they really love each other, and it comes and goes. And he said loyalty and commitment, or what he was talking about was marriage, is the bridge over these valleys. So that when times get tough and you don't like each other anymore, you still maintain a respectful behavior towards each other, a loving behavior towards each other, and just wait patiently for the feelings to come back. Now, obviously, he has some idea that there could be a limit to that. If the feelings never come back, it might need to be reconsidered. But because they've been through so many ups and downs, they know that this happens, and therefore they're not going to react to a valley or overreact to a dull time. They're not going to overreact to a time where things get a bit rough or boring. Instead, they're going to maintain good behavior towards each other, loyal, loving behavior, marriage behavior rather than like passion behavior, to see if we can get through the valley together. I've since been through this experience myself. With my wife and I, it goes up and down. It's up enough for me to go, this is worth sticking with because it always comes back up. But there are hard times. Sometimes it's external circumstances. I was having a lot of immigration issues when I first came to Czech Republic, put a real strain on our whole life, including our relationship. The commitment bridged us through that so that when that strain lifted, we were still together and then the good times came again. There's been times where my wife's been through periods of depression. She can't love anybody or anything when she's in those moments. But I understand that that's not about me. That's not a sign of how good the relationship is. I just got to bridge through this valley, and then when she comes out on the other side, I'm still there, and she loves me again. Same thing when my daughter was born, and we didn't sleep for, well, to date, we haven't slept, but the first few months, particularly the first year, was just so rough. There was just no good feelings to have, let alone share with anybody else. And so again, we just bridged through it by still behaving as man and wife and still treating each other well and not going anywhere else and so on. So that's often what commitment means to me, is that I will maintain the present, engaged, enthusiastic behavior regardless of the feelings. I'm not going to be like, this commitment depends on me wanting to do it and me feeling like it right now. More like understanding a kind of discipline. It's like working out. I don't have to feel like going to the gym to know it's a good idea to keep going. So I keep going no matter how I feel. I know it's a good idea to stay in this relationship. So I stay in this relationship no matter how I feel. Now, obviously, straight away you're going to be thinking, but what if it's a bad relationship and that's why you feel this way? And we're going to get to that as well to know the difference. Because that's essentially what we're discussing here is how do you know the difference between a brief valley that you have to get through versus signs that this is actually something that needs to end. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and you want more stuff like this, you want content on nice guy recovery, healthy relationships, confidence building, check out the link below to join the Brojo community, or you can get in touch with me personally, dan@brojo.org, to talk about any other kind of support, including one-to-one coaching. One of the things you've got to get your head around right out of the gate is nothing that's long-term is going to be blissful forever. All right. I think that's the main problem people have is things get a bit rough and a bit difficult, a bit emotional, and they think that's a sign that it must be bad because they have this idealistic picture in their head that something that's good will always feel good, which is just delusional and quite pathetically naive, to be frank. And I don't say that to judge you because I used to have this belief too. I get why people believe this. But there's nothing that's good all the time. Nothing. It's not possible to enjoy something all the time because the human brain always upgrades what satisfies it. So what you used to find exciting is just entitlement now, right? Like you can't maintain yay about something. Once you get used to it, that goes, yeah, it drops down. So for that very reason, even if the other thing never stops being as good as it was, you can't feel that way about it all the time. You take anything, take your favorite hobby and just do it non-stop and see what happens to you. Right? Don't ever take breaks from it. Let's say you like dancing. Dance for 8 hours a day, every day, and see if the love still stays the same day after day after day. Now, some of you are very enthusiastic. It might last a few days, but after a while, it starts to wear out a little bit. You start to go, fuck, is there something else I should do? And so this idea that something will always feel yay good, like that honeymoon period you had at the start of the relationship will be the way you feel the whole way through, that's just silly. It's childish to believe that. However, we have to know the difference between that dropping down to like a manageable normal range versus signs that we're actually in a bad relationship and that high at the beginning was a delusion. And of course, it really just comes down to that difference between good loyalty and bad loyalty, you might say. Good commitment, bad commitment. Like I've mentioned before, blind loyalty dismisses significant changes that weren't what you signed up for. When I was planning the wedding with my wife, one of the things I insisted on is that when we make vows, that they not be promises for the future, that they just be a commitment based on how we feel about each other right now. I can't even remember what they were, but it was not like, I'll love you forever no matter what happens, because I can't do that. I don't know. If she turned out to be a serial killer, I'm not going to be like, well, I signed up. I'm in it now, right? But there are certain things that I was aware of that I'd sign up with. If she has certain difficulties or struggles that I'm currently on board with, then I'm like, well, I'm signing up for you to continue being that way. One of the worst kinds of loyalty is I'm signing up on the condition that you're going to get better over time. Right, that's a terrible agreement. So no, no, you sign up for them as they are. If they get better, that's a bonus, but it cannot be a condition of the commitment. You're saying, I'm going to be in a relationship with you, but in your head you're thinking, so long as you become a nicer person and, so on and so forth, then you're not really making a commitment to who they are. You'll make a commitment to the promise who they might be, which is not fair on them. You take into account what we might call natural deterioration. If you're going to commit to someone, understand that they are going to get older and more tired, more slow, sicker as time passes. They aren't going to maintain the things that just cannot be maintained by any human being. So if you're signing up long term, you're also signing up to a kind of, call it inflation. The things that you like about them may dim a little over time, just as you will dim over time. And you can't expect them to maintain something that's not humanly possible, right? When somebody's 80 years old, they're not going to look like a 25-year-old. When somebody is 50, they're not going to have the memory of a 30-year-old. So you got to sign up with a bit of like life wisdom if you're going to make a commitment. But the beautiful thing is you don't actually have to make a time-based commitment. You can just make a values-based commitment. If you keep being the person that you basically are, with this value system, the way you treat me, the kind of the way you are, and that doesn't change too much, then I'll be on board with that for as long as I can be. That's different to saying like, no matter who you turn into, I'll stick with you. It's also different to saying like, if I get a little bit bored of this one day, I'm just going to bounce, right? It's going to say, I'm gonna bridge through the valleys on the condition that you don't become a completely different person. Weak loyalty is only being as loyal as your options, as they say. Like you say, I'll sign up to you unless a slightly better option comes across my path, and then I'm out. Now, a lot of you might be watching or listening to this because that's what's happening to you right now, is things got a little bit less exciting with your current partner, and then somebody exciting jumped into your frame. If you're thinking, well, that's a reason to leave the relationship, then you have weak loyalty. Now, that doesn't mean that you're also in a good relationship. These are separate considerations we must. By the way, if you like what you're hearing, you're enjoying the podcast, please check out the link below to join Brojo, or get in touch with me personally if you want to talk about one-to-one coaching, dan@brojo.org.